All right, welcome to this explainer. Today, we're diving headfirst into one of the most thrilling, downright reckless, and ultimately groundbreaking survival experiments in modern history. We're going to unpack a story that literally pits 6 men against the greatest ocean on Earth. And the crazy part? They were armed with nothing but ancient technology and this unyielding, stubborn desire to prove the entire world wrong.
So let's just start with this massive, almost ridiculous question. Could ancient people actually cross the Pacific Ocean on a simple wooden raft? I mean, it sounds like the setup for a myth, right? But back in the 1940s, this was a legitimate, heated mystery that completely divided the scientific community.
Because back then, if you asked the experts, the consensus was basically a hard no way. They said it was absolutely impossible. Most of the folks in the classrooms argued that the powerful Pacific currents and those brutal tropical storms would just instantly chew up any primitive vessel. But there was this bold Norwegian explorer named Thor Heyerdahl, and he flat out refused to accept that status quo. He didn't want to just sit around arguing in stuffy classrooms. He wanted to prove his theory by actually getting out there and doing the impossible himself.
And this is where it gets really good. Heyerdahl's entire incredible pitch boiled down to this one thought. If ancient people could have done it, then we should be able to do it using the exact same materials. This wasn't just some fun academic thought experiment anymore. This was the spark that turned a theoretical debate into a literal life-or-death ocean quest.
You see, to understand what drove the guy, we got to look at his highly controversial theory. Heyerdahl genuinely believed that some of the early inhabitants of Polynesia actually reached the islands from South America, not just from Southeast Asia, which was pretty much what everyone else thought at the time. So to prove exactly how they could have made this massive trip, he decided to build a raft using strictly ancient Inca traditions.
So they build this raft and name it the Kon-Tiki. And when you break down what actually went into it, you start to realize the sheer absurd danger of this mission. We're talking giant balsa logs, hemp ropes, bamboo, a wooden steering oar, and a single square sail. What's really crucial to notice here is what is entirely missing. There was zero steel, zero engines, and absolutely no modern navigation equipment on board.
Actually, scratch that. You know what the most terrifying part is? There were no nails holding the main logs together. None. Just realizing that their survival out there on the open ocean relied entirely on traditional rope knots is kind of mind-boggling. And because of this, plenty of experts publicly predicted the raft would just fall apart and sink before it even left the coast.
But hey, they went for it anyway. On April 28, 1947, the 6-man crew departed from Callao, Peru. And for the next 101 days, they drifted at sea, completely isolated. It didn't end until they finally crash-landed onto a coral reef at Roroya Atoll in French Polynesia on August 7th.
Now, to really wrap our heads around the danger here, think about this number, 8,000. Their intended destination was over 8,000 kilometers away from Peru. And remember, with just that wooden oar and a single square sail, the crew had almost no real control over their direction. They were trusting the ocean currents and trade winds entirely to carry them across the sea. And then, there's this number, 101. That is 101 days spent entirely at the mercy of the open sea. I mean, just imagine it for a second. Over 3 months living on a floating pile of balsa logs, completely cut off from the rest of the world. Now, obviously, this wasn't exactly a luxury cruise. They faced a lethal volume of hardships out there. They battled these towering waves that constantly threatened to swallow the raft whole. They endured violent tropical storms, intense heat, relentless saltwater exposure, and this really profound isolation. It was an absolute daily battle for survival, and it was all to prove a scientific point.
But here's the wild part. Right in the middle of all that chaos and danger, nature actually stepped in. Their daily routine showed exactly how ancient seafarers could survive these super long voyages. Flying fish would literally launch themselves onto the raft and become instant meals. The guys caught tuna, and they regularly saw enormous whale sharks swimming just inches below their feet. The Kon-Tiki essentially became its own little traveling ecosystem.
And against literally all odds, they didn't sink. After drifting approximately 6,900 kilometers, they struck that coral reef in French Polynesia. The raft was completely battered, sure, but the crew survived. They proved beyond a shadow of a doubt that crossing the vast Pacific with primitive technology was, in fact, physically possible. All right, so here's the million-dollar question, right? Did he actually prove his specific historical theory? Well, when we look at modern science today, the answer is no. Archaeological, linguistic, and modern DNA evidence actually proves that the ancestors of most Polynesians originated from islands Southeast Asia, expanding eastward. So they didn't originate primarily from South America like Heyerdahl believed.
So yeah, technically his primary destination theory was incorrect. But, and this is a huge but, this incredibly dangerous voyage wasn't a defeat by any means. In fact, some modern studies now suggest there actually might have been limited contact between Polynesians and South Americans before Europeans even arrived. Heyerdahl's physical expedition actually sparked decades of entirely new, groundbreaking research into prehistoric ocean travel.
Which leads us to what he actually gave the scientific world. By surviving this insane 101-day journey, Heyerdahl basically popularized the whole concept of experimental archaeology. That's the idea of testing historical theories by physically recreating ancient technologies and methods. Instead of just arguing over academic papers, he built a raft and sailed off into the unknown, which forever changed how we test the limits of ancient humanity.
I mean, this whole thing became an absolute global sensation. Heyerdahl wrote an international best-selling book. The footage they shot out there on the raft, it actually won the 1951 Academy Award for Best Documentary Feature. And the guy didn't even stop there. He went on to lead the Ra and Tigris expeditions, using other ancient-style boats to test even more theories. He proved for sure that bold, physical action can captivate the world's imagination.
So as we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with something to think about. Thor Heyerdahl didn't prove his exact theory about the Polynesians, but he proved something equally remarkable. We can never dismiss an idea just because it seems impossible without actually testing it first. His curiosity is this incredible testament to the human spirit. So what impossible idea, whether it's in science, history, or hey, even your own life, are we too quick to dismiss today? What is the modern equivalent of the Kon-Tiki just waiting to be built? Keep that thought with you and keep questioning the impossible.